Welcome back to Perspective. We now analyze all the international news stories in Worldview. We'll continue to discuss the international news stories with Mr. Atanu Bhattacharya. Mr. Bhattacharya, let's start with the developments in Pakistan. There is one story in the Asian Age today which says that party has won about 124 seats out of 272, and Sharif would not really need to tie up with many parties here to form the government. Only support coming from a few independents can really get him reach the 137 margin. And that's something which is going to be, in fact, even a sound thing for this party, since it would like to really see 5 years of an undisturbed kind of a rule. What would you like to say about this?
Yes, exactly, because if my memory serves me right, the last election, 2008 in Pakistan, PPP, led by Asif Ali Zardari, did not get the absolute majority, and the government was joined by Awami National Party of Frontier Gandhi family and other small groups, one party from Balochistan. But PMLN extended outside support to the government and PPP was able to form the government. Afterwards, PMLN and PPP, they fell out and Nawaz Sharif withdrew support to the government, but somehow he pulled on. Asif Ali Zardari pulled on, PPP pulled on. But this time it is not the case like 2008. This time mandate is much more, distinct, clearer mandate in favor of Nawaz Sharif. Of course, his party PMLN has won 124 seats. He still requires 12 to 13 MPs. And I think that will be provided by his coalition partners. He has a help him, will help his clan, and will help him consolidate his power base in Pakistani politics. So he has been insisting on improving ties with India. And when he was Prime Minister in 1999, he did so. He invited Vajpayee, and Atal Bihari Vajpayee took a bus to Lahore from Amritsar. Now, Nawaz Sharif has said that I will pick up the thread from there, from 1999. But the catchment base of his support, the catchment area of his, from where he will draw, he will get that extra support from which is active and which has certain links with Taliban faction in Pakistan. Okay. So they may exert their influence on Nawaz Sharif for not improving ties with India.
What would you also like to say about the Pakistan Taliban? Because the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan has clearly said that if the new government is open for a dialogue, then they are ready to have a ceasefire done.
No, you cannot take whatever TTP, Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, whatever they say, you cannot take them on their face value. And particularly this Taliban is one factor. Another factor, and the biggest factor, is the Pakistani army.
Yes.
Pakistani army, the establishment, it is referred to as the establishment, quote unquote. Now this establishment in Pakistan, they may not allow Nawaz Sharif to improve ties with India. In fact, this establishment, the establishment in Pakistan, they had upset the apple cart when Nawaz Sharif was trying to improve ties with India. And the Kargil took place. Kargil took place at the behest of the establishment, that is Pakistan army. And Nawaz Sharif, after winning this time the election, he has exposed the role of the Pakistan army, particularly the then army chief, General Parvez Musharraf. So there are a number of factors involved in
the friends. What would you like to say about this?
Yes, of course, China and Pakistan, they have been all-weather friends. I mean, they are soulmates. Their proximity goes much beyond the pale of all-weather friendship. It has stood the test of time. Pakistan, after annexing a huge chunk of Kashmir, which is Pak-occupied Kashmir, they have rewarded a huge tract of that land to China in 1963, the part of this Aksai Chin and this disputed area. So Pakistani-Chinese friend becoming the premier of China, he has decided that India would be his first port of call. He's coming to India. Now we are thinking that China is attaching much more importance to India. Of course, China attaches importance to India, but this importance flows from their strategic interest. Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is visiting Japan later this month, and this Indian Prime Minister's visit to Japan was pre-scheduled. It was scheduled much before Chinese Premier scheduled his visit to India. So India decided to visit Japan. China's growing tension with Japan is well known. China is asserting itself in East China Sea, in South China Sea. They have asserted themselves in our doorsteps, just on the line of actual control.
Right.
And the moment Chinese Premier leaves New Delhi, the Afghanistan President Hamid Karzai visits India. So, we have to look at this event as a totality. We have to take a holistic view. Whatever is happening across the region, across the South Asia region, involving China, Pakistan, India.
Tanu Bhattacharya, we don't really have any time left to discuss that, sorry. So on that note, we'll say goodbye to you. Thanks very much for joining us here. We'll take a very quick break in Perspective, and after the break, we'll analyze all the business-related news stories. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Perspective, where we'll now analyze all the business-related news stories in Bazaar Buzz. And we are joined by senior business journalist Mr. Alam Srinivas. Welcome to the program, Mr. Srinivas. Let's start the discussion with the life-saving drugs prices, whose their prices are going to now fall by about 80%, something which, how do you look at this story? I mean, is it really good news for the consumer?
I think it's a combination of things. I think what has happened is that the drug price control order was in the offing for a long time, and there have been a lot of discussions, criticism, opposition to it, both from the civil society, NGOs, and from the business community. I think finally the control order has been passed, and I think it's not just a lot of 600 plus drugs. A lot of drugs are being priced at the rate which will be higher, will be higher than the ceiling price. So their prices will come down a little bit because that is a part of the control order. But I think what is of significance here is that for the first time the government has moved to a market-based pricing system. So apart from the 600 plus drugs whose prices will be regulated and a ceiling will be fixed and nobody can price over that, and hence prices will come down. For other drugs, which is most of the other drugs, I think there will be a market system to determine the prices. And I think the market system is a better way to determine the pricing than the earlier system, which was a cost plus system. So if your costs were 100 rupees, the government would add profit of say 15% or 20% or 18%, and then you would have the retailer's margin or distribution margin, and that would be your pricing. Now the government is saying whatever is the pricing of different competitors who are likely to fall over the next few years, if this control order actually works the manner in which it's supposed to work and the manner in which it is aimed to work. So I think in that sense, a lot of users of drugs, a lot of civil society, NGOs should, I think, be very happy in the near future.
Okay. Now let's talk about gold. Gold has plunged to a 1-month low. It seemed more weaker, but its demand is at the same time increasing a lot. There are different stories which the newspapers have done in that regard. But how do you look at the gold and the fascination, the attraction that we have towards gold from the Indian point of view? And what would you like to suggest to an investor or maybe a buyer here?
See, I think there are 2-3 aspects to it. One is that if you look at gold cycle, right? And in the last couple of years, if you really look at it, there has been a huge pent-up demand which has built up. A lot of people have either postponed their gold purchase or bought less than what they wanted to, and hence there is a huge pent-up demand even now in India. In fact, if you go and talk to people, all the people are talking about, oh, I wanted to purchase gold last year, but instead of 10 tolas, I only purchased 4 because the prices were so high. Now I want to purchase another 10 tolas. So that pent-up demand is adding to the whole thing. So if this is the way things will go, then automatically the economic cycle will kind of determine that if the demand keeps going up, at some stage the prices will either kind of stall or maybe start going up again a little bit. They may not go up to the extent that they were, but they could go up or inch up a little bit. So I would expect that if people do want to buy gold or are planning to buy, I think they should still phase out their purchases instead of just buying in one go at the current price, because the prices could also go down a little bit in the short term. So they should phase out. So overall their average pricing will come to a price which is lower than the existing price if the prices go down and then go up and they fluctuate a little bit. So I would advise that to a lot of buyers. Too many loopholes. So even if you look at the Vodafone or any other deal, a lot of deal, there have been cases where people have had indirect holdings and hence they have managed to up the cap which was there. And the Enforcement Directorate and a lot of investigating agencies are investigating that whole issue. And I think in this case there was a cap that no telecom player can have more than 9%. It doesn't make sense to me. I think if you really want the cap to, if you really want competition to work perfectly and people should not have cross holding, don't allow it at all. There is no point in having 10% or 5% or any cap. So I think that is the way forward if you want that. Or the way forward is like you have caps in other horizontal and vertical, like in media sector, in internationally there is a cap of 20%. So if you're in broadcasting, you cannot have more than 20% in say DTH or cable. I think those are the kind of caps which are legitimate, because a lot of business may want to invest in